Welcome to G Fun Facts Online. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on some of society's most vital and respected professions. Surgeons, pilots, firefighters, police officers. We see them as symbols of courage and skill, operating where the margin for error is zero. But beneath the surface of their expertise lies a silent crisis, a battle for mental well-being fought against immense pressure and a culture that often demands stoicism above all else. We're going to explore the unseen psychological toll of these high-stakes careers, the unique stressors they face, and the evolving systems designed to protect our protectors. To understand this, we first need a framework. Occupational health psychology is the science of work and well-being. A key concept here is the job demands resources model. It's simple but powerful. Job strain and burnout happen when the demands of a job outweigh the resources an employee has to cope. Job demands are things that require sustained effort. Think long hours, intense pressure, and traumatic exposure. Job resources are the things that help manage those demands: support from colleagues, a sense of autonomy, and a positive work culture. When demands are sky high and resources are low, the risk of burnout skyrockets. This model is the perfect lens for viewing the world of high-stakes professions, where the demands are inherently extreme. Let's start in the operating room. The world of a surgeon is one of incredible precision and profound responsibility. They literally hold life in their hands, but this power comes at a staggering psychological cost. The stressors are relentless. Long, unpredictable hours, and the constant pressure to make life-or-death decisions in moments. Their daily work involves confronting illness, suffering, and death, which is emotionally draining and can lead to compassion fatigue. A particularly powerful stressor is the inevitability of surgical complications. Even for the most skilled surgeon, bad outcomes happen. The psychological impact of these events on the surgeon can be immense, leading to anxiety, guilt, and even symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. A poor patient outcome can shake a surgeon's confidence to its core. Compounding this is the culture of surgery itself. It's a field that has historically valued stoicism and emotional resilience. This creates an environment where admitting you're struggling is seen as a sign of weakness or incompetence. This fear of stigma is a massive barrier to getting help. The statistics are alarming. A landmark study by the American College of Surgeons found that 40% of surgeons screened positive for burnout. 30% showed symptoms of depression. This is far higher than in other medical specialties and the general population. For surgical residents, it's even worse, with some studies showing burnout rates as high as 69%. And this isn't just about the doctor's well-being. It directly impacts patient care. Burnout is linked to a higher rate of medical errors and lower quality of care. The most concerning statistic is about suicide. Physicians already have a higher suicide rate than the general population, and surgeons are at a particularly high risk. One study found that 1 in 16 surgeons had contemplated suicide in the past year. The rate for female physicians is even more stark, being up to 400% higher than in other professions. In response, support systems are growing. Peer support programs are becoming common, connecting surgeons with trained peers for confidential support. Institutions are also introducing mindfulness and stress management training. But the biggest challenge is systemic, changing the culture to promote work-life balance and psychological safety, so surgeons feel they can speak up without fear. Now, let's move from the operating room to 30,000 feet. The cockpit of an aircraft is another realm of immense responsibility. While the view is incredible, a pilot's psychological landscape is often turbulent. The stressors are unique. Irregular schedules and long-haul flights disrupt circadian rhythms, leading to chronic fatigue. On top of this, they face constant pressure to perform flawlessly, where a single mistake could be catastrophic. The job also involves long periods of isolation, straining relationships back home. But perhaps the biggest stressor is regulatory. Aviation authorities like the FAA have strict medical standards. While necessary for safety, This creates a climate of fear. Pilots are often terrified to disclose a mental health issue, worried they'll be grounded and lose their license and their entire livelihood. Because of this fear of reporting, the true prevalence of mental health issues is hard to track. However, a groundbreaking 2016 Harvard study gave us a glimpse. It found that 12.6% of airline pilots surveyed met the criteria for likely depression, and a shocking 4.1% reported having suicidal thoughts in the 2 weeks prior. The study concluded that hundreds of pilots are likely flying while experiencing depressive symptoms, often without seeking treatment. This culture of silence is a dangerous paradox. The very safety regulations in place can discourage pilots from getting the help they need. The tragic Germanwings Flight 9525 crash in 2015, where the co-pilot deliberately crashed the plane, brought this issue into the global spotlight. In the wake of such tragedies, the industry is slowly changing. There's a growing recognition that a punitive approach doesn't work. Peer support programs are now seen as one of the most effective tools, providing a confidential channel for pilots to talk to other pilots. Airlines are also using employee assistance programs, though trust in their confidentiality can be low. Crucially, regulatory bodies like the FAA are updating their policies, allowing for the use of certain antidepressant medications and moving toward a more flexible approach, recognizing that a well-managed condition doesn't automatically mean a pilot is unsafe to fly. Next, we turn to those who run toward danger when everyone else runs away. Firefighters. They are symbols of courage, but the invisible wounds they carry are often the most severe. The stressors are both acute and chronic. Firefighters are regularly exposed to horrific scenes, gruesome accidents, medical emergencies, the devastating aftermath of fires. This repeated exposure to trauma puts them at an extremely high risk for PTSD, at a rate comparable to combat veterans. Beyond the trauma, there's the crushing weight of responsibility, the pressure to be an infallible hero in the most chaotic situations. Sleep deprivation from shift work is a constant, leading to physical and mental exhaustion. And while the firehouse is often described as a family, that same tight-knit culture can create pressure to conform to a tough guy image and hide any weakness. The mental health statistics are grim. Around 20% of firefighters meet the criteria for PTSD at some point in their careers, compared to just 6.8% for the general population. They also face higher risks for depression and anxiety. But the most alarming statistic is this. It is estimated that more firefighters die by suicide each year than in the line of duty. One study found that nearly half of all firefighters had considered suicide at some point. This is a full-blown crisis, made worse by a culture of silence. The fire service has long been defined by a macho culture that values toughness and emotional control. Admitting to PTSD or depression can be seen as a chink in the armor, jeopardizing one's career and reputation. Studies show that up to 92% of firefighters cite this stigma as the primary reason for not seeking help. Fortunately, there is a growing movement to extinguish this stigma. Peer support programs, championed by organizations like the International Association of Firefighters, are at the forefront. Comprehensive behavioral health and wellness programs are being implemented in fire departments, and initiatives like the National Volunteer Fire Council's Share the Load program offer critical resources. Real change, however, must come from the top. Fire service leaders are beginning to foster a culture of psychological safety, where seeking help is encouraged and resources are readily available. Finally, let's look at the police officer on the front lines of societal stress. Officers stand as the guardians of our communities, but their job exposes them to the darkest parts of human nature. The stressors they face are layered and complex. First, there are the operational stressors inherent to the job. The constant threat of physical harm, exposure to violence and death, and dealing with victims of crime. The average officer is exposed to an estimated 800 traumatic incidents in their career. In contrast, a typical citizen might experience 3. This cumulative trauma is a direct pathway to PTSD, anxiety, and depression. But many researchers have found that organizational stressors are even more damaging. These are the stressors that come from within the department itself. Poor management, excessive overtime due to understaffing, a lack of support from supervisors, and a feeling of being unfairly scrutinized by the public and the organization. This constant grinding stress can be more corrosive than the trauma of the streets. The mental health statistics for law enforcement are deeply concerning. Studies show police officers are 5 times more likely to suffer from PTSD and depression. Nearly 25% of officers have considered suicide in their lifetime. And just like with firefighters, it's estimated that for every 1 officer who dies in the line of duty, 2.5 die by suicide. A significant barrier to healing is the blue wall of silence. This is an unwritten code that prioritizes loyalty to fellow officers above all else. While it can build solidarity, it also creates a culture where asking for help is seen as a sign of weakness. Officers fear being judged, deemed unfit for duty, or having their struggles used against them, so they suffer in silence. In response to this crisis, a movement is growing to prioritize officer wellness. Peer support is again a cornerstone, with networks like the Texas Law Enforcement Peer Network offering anonymous resources. There is also a push for culturally competent mental health professionals who understand the unique culture of policing. Confidential hotlines like COPLINE, staffed by retired officers, provide 24/7 support. The goal is to shift from reactive to proactive care, equipping officers with tools for stress management and resilience before a crisis hits. So what do we see when we look at these 4 professions together? A clear and troubling pattern emerges. They are all bound by a common thread: the immense psychological weight of their jobs. The common stressors are undeniable: high stakes and immense responsibility, constant exposure to trauma, long and irregular work hours, and perhaps most damagingly, a pervasive culture of stoicism and stigma that discourages asking for help. This leads to a similar pattern of mental health outcomes: rampant burnout, high rates of PTSD, depression, anxiety, and tragically, alarmingly high rates of suicide. But there is hope, and the solutions also share common ground. Across the board, peer support is emerging as a powerful first line of defense. The ability to speak with a colleague who truly understands is invaluable. More importantly, there's a growing recognition that this requires a fundamental cultural shift, driven by leadership, away from a macho ethos and toward one of psychological safety. The focus is shifting from reacting to crises to preventing them with proactive wellness training. The mental health of our surgeons, pilots, firefighters, and police officers is not a niche issue. It is a matter of public health and safety. Their well-being directly impacts the quality of protection and care we all receive. The path forward requires a sustained effort to dismantle the walls of silence, build a culture of support, and ensure that those who carry the heaviest burdens are not left to do so alone. Their health is a reflection of our society's health, and it's a responsibility we all share.